Peace and joy be unto you from our Lord and our Savior, Jesus the Christ. We're in the midst of a series on living the Serenity Prayer, to see it on the screens. And we've walked already through the most well-known part of this prayer, where the prayer states, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And today we begin the second half of that prayer, the second part of it, which begins with the phrase, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time. Before we get going, let's start with the prayer that you see up on the screen. Let's pray together, please. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle in us the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and we shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Amen. Amen. The gospel lesson that Winnie read just a few moments ago from St. John's Gospel, the 12th chapter, the story when Jesus is at the home of Lazarus and Mary and Martha. The text speaks about the shortness of Jesus' time with his disciples and his friends, because from there, not far outside Jerusalem, he is going to be going into Jerusalem. We don't see Jesus worrying. Yes, he has concerns, for sure, regarding his date with destiny, if you will, on Calvary. No doubt about that. But he brings those concerns to the only one who can do anything about them, who knows what the future is, his Father. The Old Testament text that's assigned for today as well, too, that we did not read, is from Isaiah chapter 43. And there are two important verses. They're important to me anyway, but I think they're important to all of us. And quite frankly, the prayer of the day really picked up on them. When it says in verses 18 and 19 of Isaiah 43, it says, forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. The Serenity Prayer challenges you and me to live in the present, to live one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time. So we're going to focus on that part of the prayer today. Today's gospel lesson, as I just mentioned before, from John 12, speaks about Mary taking a very costly and expensive perfume and anointing Jesus' feet with it, much to the chagrin of Judas, the disciple, who says it would have been put to better use to have sold it and give the money to the poor. But Mary prefers to take that perfume and make a good use of it at this particular moment. Mary's living in the present. And that living in the present by Mary, makes the most of her time and with Jesus, and it glorifies Jesus. Mary, in this scene, is living in the present. I'd like you to use your imagination for a few minutes here. I'm going to ask you to do something that I don't do very often, and it could be a little dangerous, okay, on my part. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. I don't want to hear any snoring now, okay? All right? I'd like you to close your eyes, if you would, for just a moment. Sit back and relax and just close your eyes. Imagine that it's tomorrow morning. You wake up and you open your eyes, and there, right next to your bed, is Jesus sitting right next to you. You're surprised, because you're expecting to see perhaps your spouse, who doesn't look at all like Jesus, especially first thing in the morning. But there's Jesus anyway. And he says, I've been here all night, watching you sleep, thinking about how much I love you. And I'd like to spend today with you. I want to help you. I want to give you courage and wisdom. But mostly, I just want to be with you today, he says, because you mean so much to me. And he asks, would that be okay? You hardly can believe it. And you say, sure, That's the best offer I've had. I'd love for you to be a part of my day. And so you start your day, you and Jesus together. Nobody else can see him. It's just a secret thing between you and Jesus. But you find that doing that your day with Jesus makes all the difference in the world. His presence changes your whole mindset, your whole attitude. The first thing that you notice is you aren't worried or anxious about anything. You go to work, and your boss tells you about some serious problem that you're going to have to deal with. But you've got Jesus right there to help you. And he actually gives you the energy and the wisdom and the guidance that you need to accomplish that. Sometimes he gives you concrete ideas for how to handle things. Other times he says, hey, I want you to work this out on your own because it's going to stretch your mind. But you see Jesus with you right there. It's a kind of partnership. And your relationships with other people are different too. Because Jesus is always there with every person that you encounter during this day. Between you and that other person, there's Jesus. And you notice the way that he looks at that other person. You can see how much he loves them. And a funny thing begins to happen when you find yourself looking at them the same way Jesus does. You find yourself seeing in that other person what Jesus sees in them. And you start responding to that person the way that Jesus does. Not because you have to, but because you want to. And while you're driving in your car, you look over, and there's Jesus watching you drive. He looks a little nervous, yes? So you find yourself driving a little slower than usual. And you're especially careful about how you salute other drivers. You find yourself talking to Jesus quite a lot through the day. On your way to work, you just talk to him. When you're sitting at your desk, or you're going for a walk during lunch hour, you talk to him. You find that having Jesus there with you makes the difference in the way you handle all kinds of decisions. Decisions about your money, decisions about your leisure time, and your level of gratitude and confidence and wonder and joy. You find them during the day going up. And your level of anger and anxiety and impatience going down. And you realize that not only do you like being with him, you like who you are becoming in his presence. You discover that Jesus is very polite. He won't intrude where he's not wanted. And the truth is that there are several times when you don't, quite frankly, during your day, want him around. There are moments, to be honest, when you want to do something or say something that you'd rather not have him hear. But amazingly, you can even talk to him about those things. And he understands. He says, you know what? We can work on this, you and me. We'll work it out. And as your day ends, it ends just the way that it started. In your bed. And you're talking quietly with Jesus. Together, just the two of you. You look back on your day as you've walked through it, hand in hand. You walk, you talk about what went well and what things you got wrong, and you learn from it. And the last thing you do before you go to sleep, you're almost like a little child. You say to him, you look at him. Do you think you could stay with me a little longer? He says, my plan is to sit here all night and to watch you sleep. He says, it's one of my favorite things to do. And tomorrow, if you want, we can do it all over again. Can you imagine him right beside you? He's there right now. He promises that. In Matthew's Gospel, the 28th chapter, he says, behold, I am with you always until the end of the age. In Hebrews 13, it is written, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." So Jesus promises to be with you tomorrow, every moment of the day. But the sad thing is, so oftentimes, we don't even know it. Some of us are going through our whole day without ever registering the thought of Jesus standing right beside us. And that's because we live in what the Bible calls the world. We're trapped in a world of date books and to-do lists and alarm clocks and schedules that are constantly reminding us that we're running late for the next thing on our list. We're trapped in a world of TV and computers and smartphones. We live in a world that's constantly calling us away from what we have, out of where we are, telling us that we're never happy unless we buy this product or have that particular experience. That's life lived in the world. A life that never quite catches up. There's always something more to do, something more to achieve, something more to consume. Life in the world is always something more up ahead, in the future. And so naturally, it's always a life of worry. Will I be able to make that? Will I be able to do that? Will I be able to have that? And we're focused on that future that we can't possibly know. And no matter what we have right now, we can't be secure. See, life lived in the world is frantic, anxious, exhausting. But in contrast to a life in the world, Jesus talks about a different kind of life. In Luke 12, he says, "Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow can worry about itself. Don't worry about what you're going to eat or drink or wear." He basically says, that's no way to live. Instead of living in the world, always striving for what we don't have, and worrying about a future that we can't know, Jesus says, live in the present. And that's exactly what this serenity prayer is saying too. It says that if we want to find courage and wisdom and serenity, we need to live in the present, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, is living in the present. Living in the present really means living in the presence of God. I know God is always present, and you know that, whether you're conscious of it or not. But to live in the presence of God is to know that we're aware of His presence, know that what it's really like to spend that day with Jesus. And that sometimes you can really, can only do one day at a time, and one moment at a time. A particularly important lesson in the Scriptures is in the book of Exodus. The people are out in the wilderness. They've left Egypt. They've broken away from slavery. They're in the middle of the wilderness for those 40 years. And it's not long before they're out there grumbling and complaining because they don't have anything to eat. They don't have anything to eat. And Moses practically has a mutiny on his hands. And so God hears their plea. And God sends food to the people in the form of what is called manna. In the morning, people get up and they find the ground covered with this flaky bread that probably tasted a lot like cardboard, I suspect, or maybe like a stale communion wafer. And what is this stuff? They asked Moses. And Moses says it's called manna. It comes from God. He says to gather up today's supply for today. But it had one particular and peculiar feature. It only lasted for one day. The people would gather it up in the morning and it would taste fine. But as soon as they tried to stash some for tomorrow, it would turn into a mess. The only way people could benefit from the manna was to go out every new day, every new morning, and gather up a fresh supply from God. And that's exactly what living in the presence of God is like. You can't stock it up for tomorrow. It's got to be one day at a time. We can't have a conversionary experience or confirm our faith or arrived and join a congregation and say, well, hey, I've done it. I've arrived. I'm in God's presence. It doesn't work that way, you see. It's got to be one day at a time. If you want to live in the presence of God, you've got to learn how to live one ordinary day at a time with God. The Hebrews had it right. You know when their day starts? At sunset. At sunset. The Jews worship that way. In the book of Genesis, it says there was evening, there was morning, the first day. So the day starts at sunset. Usually the time when we're thinking about retiring for the day. But the Bible's there to remind us that that evening, that God was working. The day begins when we go to sleep. God goes to work in the world. And how you go to sleep is important. Paul writes, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. Don't go to sleep with unresolved conflict and anger. Don't go to sleep with anxiety and fear. Because the way you go to sleep at night is going to set the tone how you sleep all night and how you live the next day. So take a few moments before you sleep to review the day that's passed with God. Just the two of you. Review it in your head. If a sin comes up, confess it to God. If there's a blessing, say thanks to God. If concerns come up, give them over to God. That's the way to get a good night's sleep. And end by telling God that you want to spend tomorrow with Him as well. Invite Him into your day. And God will give you a good night's sleep. That's something all of us can do, can't we? You don't have to be some kind of super Christian in order to live in the presence of God. All we need to do is invite Him in to share what we know about our own lives with Him. And we wake then with an expectation. Not like when we're getting up on the first day of vacation, huh? We don't have any problem getting up and getting going the first day of vacation, do we, huh? Not at all. Not at all. Because we have expectations. And when we expect God to be a part of our day, we have expectations as well, too. The psalmist wrote 3,000 years ago, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Because the psalmist expected God to be a part of his day. Do you see today as a gift? If you're living as if you're dying, you certainly would. We never know when that'll be in our lives. So how do we wake up with God? For some of us, that's really hard. You know, there are always two kinds of people in the world. There are people who love to get up in the morning, and there are people who hate people who love to get up in the morning, right? Okay? Right? If you're that second kind, all right, and yet at this service you're probably not, okay, because your eyes are already up and going there. But maybe even Jesus doesn't like being around you if you're that second kind of person in the morning. But what He invites us to do is to spend a couple minutes with Him, a couple moments, and invite Him into the challenges that we face that day. And to spend that time brings a greater sense of awareness of His presence. We acknowledge our dependence on Him, and our concerns are bigger than ourselves, and we want Him to handle them. When we walk through and begin our day that way, He brings blessing. The psalmist in Psalm 5 writes, "In the morning I lay my request before God, and I wait in expectation." And so, give Jesus your first word. Give Him your first thought. Wake up with Jesus. You can do that. You can do it tomorrow morning. I invite you to do that. And then comes the rest of the day. And as we tried to picture when we started that imaginary walk through our day. Spending the day with Jesus isn't about doing a lot of things that we're not already doing. It's about doing what you're doing, but with a different kind of attitude, a new kind of consciousness. It's the same day that it's always been, but you're doing it with Jesus. And then throw in some special times and have some special experiences with Jesus. And today, we have one of those times when we have a special time. As we have Holy Communion in a few minutes, we'll invite you to come forward in a little while. And you'll get to share that same bread and the same cup that Jesus shared with his friends the night before he died. And as you do, I want to encourage you to remember that Jesus is with you in that moment. He's right by your side. And he'll be there tomorrow morning and day after day and every day of your life. Just invite him to be there. One day at a time. One moment at a time. In Jesus' name. Amen. On the back of your outline is printed the Serenity Prayer. Will you please pray it with me right now? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway of peace, taking and heed this world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever the next. Amen. Amen. Let's stand and profess our faith in the words of the Apostle.